Oh, I'm a good old rebel. Now that's just what I am. And for this Yankee land of freedom, I don't give up. We're in the church. Darn. I'm glad I fit against her. I only wish we'd won. And I don't ask no pardon for anything I've done. We would like to welcome all of you to the Ellis Norman and Susan Alsley Poindexter Norman reunion. We're delighted to have all of you with us. Let me say this from the beginning. My name is Larry Ellis Norman. I was named after Ellis. My father was James Ellis Norman. His father was Wick Norman, and Wick, of course, was a son of Ellis and Susan. This is my sister, Susan Norman. She has the same ancestry. So I don't have to repeat all that. But we want to welcome you here today. For the next few moments, I'm not going to be Larry Ellis Norman. I'm going to be Ellis Norman, who was my great-grandfather and the progenitor of our family. So I'm going to take just a few moments to tell you a little bit about him, or some facts that may be a little bit controverted about what he did and when he did it. But Ellis Norman was born in Forbush Community on April 26, 1864. Now I'm Ellis. 1844, I'm sorry. I died on January 5, 1918. I was 73 years of age. I would be 167 years old if I were living today. So if I get some things wrong, you might understand why. My father was David Chandler Norman. My mother was Millicent Phillips Norman. I had 7 sisters and 3 brothers. We farmed when we were growing up. David bought a farm from John Norman that consisted of about 200 acres of land. We raised large crops. We had cattle. Our grandmother, Sarah Chandler Norman, lived with us. She died right before the war that I'll talk about in a few moments. We were brought up as Quakers. When that scoundrel Lincoln, now he won't worth a hill of beans, was elected president and invaded the South, the war for Southern independence broke out. Now, I didn't want to go off to war. I did everything I could to keep from going off to war. We didn't own no slaves. We avoided it as long as we could. In fact, when the soldiers came, and I'm talking about Confederate soldiers and Yankee soldiers, we did everything we could to avoid it. At one point, we even hid in a cave, and the soldiers came up to the mouth of that cave, but they didn't find us. And later on, there was a guy in the community of Forbush that told where we were hiding, but we were able to escape. We went to his house. We were going to kill it. I'll be honest with you. We were going to kill it. But his wife jumped in his lap and begged for his life. Being the Quaker that I was, we didn't kill him. My older brother, William H., he was about 4 years older than I am, or was, used to be. He and I decided to join up, and we joined up with the 21st North Carolina Confederate Infantry, and we went off to war. I was 17 years of age. We went to Virginia, and we fought for a while. But I got to be honest with you. When we got to fighting, he and I just left. And we came home because we didn't have any slaves to keep our farm going. So we had to come home and look after our people. But in 1864, we were captured in Louisville, Kentucky, and we stayed there until the end of the war. During that period of time, I learned how to make some chairs while I was in Kentucky. I about starved. I had the rheumatism. I was treated terribly by them old Yankees. Oh, I'm a good old rebel. Now that's just what I am. And for this Yankee land of freedom, I don't give up. We're in the church. Darn. I'm glad I fit against her. I only wish we'd won. And I don't ask no pardon for anything I've done. Now, William H. and I survived the war and we came home. And you're lucky I came back. Because many of you who are here tonight wouldn't be here tonight if I'd been killed during that war. Just think about that a minute. When I got back, I married Octavia Poindexter, and we had a daughter, little Sarah Cordelia. Octavia died a couple of years later when little Sarah Cordelia was about 2 years old, and at that point, I married Sarah Poindexter. Susan. Sarah. Okay. That's her. Susan, what did we do the world to do? Look at all this crap.
I don't know.
What did we do to this world?
It's rather scary.
We produced all these. But anyhow, I married Susan Poindexter Norman in 1870. I was about 26 years old at that time.
I'm Susan Poindexter. I was born in 1853. My parents were Thomas Charlotte Martin Poindexter, and he was commonly known as Thomas C.M. Poindexter, and my mother was Margaret Wooten. I'm going to go back just a little bit and tell you why I was named Susan. My great-grandfather was also a Thomas Poindexter, and he lived in Louisa County, Virginia, and he was a tobacco farmer. Well, he fell in love with a beautiful young woman there named Sarah Hughes, but she was the daughter of a wealthy Englishman, and he would not give permission for my great-grandfather Thomas to marry his daughter. He was just an old tobacco farmer. One day he was out plowing the field, and he got a message from her that said, "My parents have gone away for the day. If you'll come quickly, we can run off and get married." So I unhitched the horse, jumped on his back, didn't even bother to stop and get cleaned up or anything. He was wearing an old flax shirt and toe shirt and flax pants, and he got on the horse and he took off. Well, when he got to Susan's house, there she was all decked out in a beautiful silk dress, and she jumped up on a tree stump, and when he came by, she jumped on the back of the horse and off they ran. Well, we don't know exactly what happened when her father came home. But anyway, Susan Hughes was married to Thomas Poindexter, and for about a year, this was in 1755, and about a year later, she and her newborn child died as a result of a difficult childbirth. She did not leave any Poindexter heirs, but because of her willingness to run off and marry this poor old tobacco farmer and leave her wealthy family, people down through the generations have named their children Susan or Sue or Susanna. So that's a little bit of history, and if you'll look at our family, you'll see some Sues and Susans there. This Captain Thomas Poindexter went on to fight in the Revolutionary War, and he eventually married Elizabeth Pledge, which we'll talk about a little bit later. My mom and papa were farmers. When I was 3 years old, my sister Sarah was born. When I was 5 years old, my sister Eliza was born. Papa entered the Civil War in 1861, and in October of that same year, only 4 months after Papa went off to fight, Mama got very ill and died of typhoid fever. Well, Papa decided that Eliza and I should go to live with our Uncle Pleasant and Aunt Temperance Poindexter, and he sent Sarah over to live with the Wooten grandparents. Well, that worked out fine for a while, but then Uncle Pleasance decided he had to go fight in the Civil War. So then Elizabeth and I went to live with our Wooten grandparents. In July of 1862, only 9 months after Mama died, we got word that Papa had been wounded and he had died in a hospital in Richmond, Virginia. It was a very sad time for our family because that very same week we got another message that our Uncle William Poindexter had died in Richmond also. So some of the men in the family hitched up a wagon, horses, and took off to Virginia to retrieve their bodies. Needless to say, it took a few days, and when they came back, their bodies were rather badly decomposed, and so a real nice service and burial could not be held. But we all gathered by candlelight down in the Macedonia Church Cemetery, and they were buried by candlelight there. Sarah, Eliza, and I were fortunate that we could live with our grandparents. We were well cared for. We had aunts, uncles, and cousins that took care of us. And I remember my cousin, Octavia, when she married Ellis. She was a few years older than I. I thought Ellis was a very handsome man. And although we were very saddened by Octavia's death, after a few years, he started courting me. And a couple of years later, we were married in 1870. I was 17 years old, and he was 26.
Rob the cradle. We had a farm near East Bend, and we built a nice house. We had 13 children, and we had generally a happy life. We farmed, we raised tobacco. I was a faithful man. I always remembered my Quaker upcoming. I always tried to do the best that I could. We had some hard times, as you might imagine, during Reconstruction, but we also had a lot of good times. We had playful times. We always played games with our children and had a good time out in the yard. I enjoyed my fish pond. Every day I would go out and I'd feed my fish. And then when I wanted fish to eat, I would go out and feed my fish, and they would all come up, and I could walk out. You've probably seen it on TV on that newfangled thing. I could walk out and I could catch the fish with my hand and throw them up on the bank and say, "Susan, come clean these fish. We're going to have fish for supper." I enjoyed blacksmithing. We always kept ice. I would dam up the pond during the wintertime, and the pond would freeze over, and we would cut ice, and then we would put it under the house in sawdust. We always had ice that we could share with people. You know, typhoid was bad back then, but we could share it with other family members and other people in the community. We shared with them. One of the things I always did was when we raised tobacco, we would always turn the fires out, put the fires out in our tobacco curing barns at midnight on Saturdays, and we would keep them off until midnight on Sundays, because we didn't believe we needed to cure tobacco on Sunday. And we would start curing again on Monday morning. It was meant to be a day of rest, and we abided by that.
I want to talk to you a little bit about our children. Well, first of all, I need to tell you that my sisters, Sarah and Eliza, both married Normans, distant cousins.
Smart folks.
Yeah. And we had this contest to see who could have the most children. Well, Sarah had 13, Eliza had 10, and I had 13. So,
one thing Normans like to do, but it
our first child, Gray, was born in 1873 when I was 20 years old. The 13th child, Maud was born in 1898 when I was 45 years old. So I spent about 25 years, just having all these children. So, needless to say, there was always a great big ruckus going on at our house. There were pranks, fights, spats. But all in all, they would stick up for each other when push came to shove. It has been said that the Normans have a unique personality characterized by a keen sense of humor, a twinkle in the eye, and plenty of jokes and pranks. Well, you can imagine, I had a hard time keeping up with all these children. Now, I'm sad to tell you that 3 of our children did not live to be adults. Our little Hayes died at 10 months, little Myrtle at 3 months, and then another infant who was only 10 days old. So only 10 of the children survived until adulthood. But you can imagine what my life was like. I was always growing the vegetables, canning the food, putting up the preserves, making the clothes, this, and this. Okay, which brings me around to perhaps you have seen my picture over here with my cow. Right there it is. Now, I was very, very proud of my cows. I even dressed up and put on a hat to have my picture made with my cow. Okay, now, a cow was the most important thing a farm wife could have, except lots of children to help her out, because it was the main staple of what we had to eat. The milk, the cream, the butter. But a cow's a lot of work. You've got to milk the cow every day. You've got to make sure the cow grazes where it should graze. So it was a constant thing for me with my cows. But I think you'll see why a cow was very important to me. Well, I'm going to tell you that it has even been said that I named my 4 daughters after cows. Their names were Bessie, Leela, Lacey, and Maud. Now, I'm not going to say I named them after cows, but I'll let you decide. One more interesting thing happened to change the subject, and that has to do with our Indian ancestry that came through the Poindexter side of the family. As a child, I was always told that we were descendants of Chief Donahue. Now, I know y'all are thinking, that's not how you say that word. That little village over beyond the Yadkin River named Donahaw or Donnyhaw is what we say today. But Donahaw is a misspelling of the word. The word is Donahue. Well, the federal government, in their infinite wisdom, always has a commission of some sort. So they formed the Dawes Commission so that descendants of the Cherokees could file for reparations from the federal government. So I thought, hey, that's me. I'll do it. So I filled out the claim papers, and I had to include my children who lived at home. And for those of you from Iowa that are here, David Chandler was of age, and he filled out a claim form too. And in this, we had to list how we were related to Donahue. Okay, here's how it goes. Donahue married an English woman named Mary Wentworth, and they had a child named Betty. Betty married a man named William Pledge, and they had a daughter named Elizabeth. Now, she's the one that was second wife to that Thomas I told you about a little while ago, whose first wife was Susan. And then they had a son, Robert Alexander Poindexter, who was my grandfather. So it comes on down through the line that way. When all was said and done, we were denied the claim. The federal government was very willing to acknowledge our kinship to Donahue. But the problem was they could not verify that Donahue was really Cherokee or whether he was a member of one of these other tribes that were around in the area. So we didn't get any money or anything. But a funny thing happened when I filled out my claim papers. It was a long, involved process to do, and these papers are available through the Cherokee Nation, by the way. But you had to list your children. So I'm sitting at the table filling out my papers, and I write down the children. I look around the table and see who's there. Well, I sent them off in the mail. So glad to have that work done. But a couple of days later, my daughter Bessie came home. She had been away for a while, and I thought, oh my goodness, I left Bessie off. So I had to write a letter to the Cherokee Nation explaining why I forgot one of my children. But it didn't make any difference. We still were denied.
Some of my children, some of our children, I should say, had a hankering to go west. A lot of children in Yadkin back then decided that they just weren't satisfied with Yadkin, and they wanted to go somewhere else. So 3 of my children, David, Charlie, and Leela, went to Iowa, and they settled there, and they raised families. Some of the others, like Wick and Hobby, went out there for a while, but they didn't like it. So they came back to old Yadkin. I gave David and Charlie and Leela some money to help them get started, and I gave my other children that stayed some land for farming. I kind of split up what I had and gave it to them. I died. It was a sad day. On January 5, 1918. And since that time, I have been watching all of you, and I got to tell you, I'm proud of my family. I'm proud of being a North.
Yes, Ellis died.
I'll go back
Ellis died at the age of 73 of aortic regurgitation, whatever that is. And my heart was broken. But I had to keep on because I still had Maud and Hobart at home. And the house was always full of children, grandchildren, and later great-grandchildren. And then I was known to visit my children very often. It was a common sight for the people in the area to see me with my horse and buggy going up and down the roads. As I grew older and was in my 80s, all the women in the family kept asking me the same question. They kept saying, "Why don't you have any wrinkles in your face?" And I was very proud to tell them that that came from washing my face 3 times every morning in ice cold well water. So, some of you might want to try that. A little bit later on, when the children deemed that I was too feeble to leave, to stay at home by myself, I began staying with my children, and I'd stay with one child for a certain amount of time, and then I'd travel to another house. Since I had all these children, why not? So there were 7 of them around, and I tried to split my time up with them because I really enjoyed my children. I died in 1939 in Lacey's house. My grandsons, some of them, were my pallbearers, and they laid me to rest next to Ellis right outside here. I hope you visited that today. I was thankful for a good life.
We're going to talk, much obliged, much obliged. We're going to talk just a few moments about families, and Susan is my older sister. Much older, but no. But she is my older sister, and I always do what she says. But we're going to talk about families, and we want to recognize each family. We'd like to ask that those of you who are here from that family to please stand up and let us recognize you. And then if you want to say something, please say something about your family. Uncle Gray,
Read out the names.
Plummer,
Plumer.
I'm sorry. Foy, Vivian, Edward, and Goldie. Any of Uncle Gray's family?
There they are.
There's a bunch of them. He was the oldest, I think. Do any of you have any things you would like to say? We're delighted to have you. Say something. Y'all appoint somebody real quick. Yes, go ahead. Speak for that family.
I don't know what to say for him. But just want to welcome all of you here today.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. And then Uncle Dave, Gertrude, John Ellis, David Lowell, Jesse, Herbert, and Wilma. Uncle Dave's family. There they are. Look at that. Great to have y'all. They're from, some of you say they're from Iowa. Some of you say they're from our way. And this morning, when we were listening to the weather forecast, they were talking about we might have tornadoes in this area. And I said, those folks will come in handy because they know how to do it. Please, somebody speak for Uncle Dave.
We're just glad to be here. We had no idea we had family in North Carolina.
So it wasn't for Luann's
Yeah,
Spark
it
this
wasn't for
change.
Luann, who called their mother, who told them to call me, who I had moved to North Carolina, and my sister had died, and I was reading some of my mother's old mail because I was lonesome, and I found a letter that David Chandler Norman's wife had written from East Bend, North Carolina.
Oh, wow.
So we came here to this cemetery. My husband and I just drove here and found out a whole bunch of Normans and Poindexters, but we had no idea how to contact anybody because we didn't have any current history. So one day Luann called Charlotte, and Charlotte said, you need to call God because she's here. So
That
we
is
are so
wonderful.
thankful to,
Yeah, to find out.
I want to give a shout out to the Lord for working all that out.
Thank you all. The only thing I'm worried about is they may go back to Iowa or our way and say we're not related. But
That'll never happen.
I'm glad y'all are.
Taking a lot of pictures.
Ain't Leela's family? Bruce, Mabel, and Harry.
There they are.
And here they are right here.
We live in Greenville, North Carolina now, but we are originally from Iowa. Both my husband and I were born and raised New Providence. I am so embarrassed that I don't know you all from Iowa. But growing up in Iowa, I remember some summers when family from North Carolina would come out, and I just have a vague memory of some names, but good times and laughter. I also remember coming to North Carolina a couple of times. We always drove out, and I got to sit in the back seat with Grandma, which was Leela, and she'd play finger games with us and keep us quiet. And I remember Daddy got picked up for speeding, but we always stayed with Aunt Maud, and she had this awful drink. It was called sweet iced tea. We loved it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm not sure anybody's here from Uncle Charlie's family from Iowa. Anybody here from Uncle Charlie's family? And then Uncle Wick's family, Bernice, Merville, James Ellis, Alberta Page, Olga with the children. Olga, of course, is still with us, so she is a grandchild. Anybody from Uncle Wick's family? That's our family. Somebody talk. Everybody stand up. There's Lou Ann. Lou Ann, say something about our family.
They're all good looking, and I hope they don't eat too much.
And Lisi's family, Fred and Gail. There's Sammy. Y'all talk. Say something, Carolyn.
I'm just thrilled. I had no idea it was going to be anything this big. I'm so thrilled.
Thank you. And thank y'all for coming. Thank you. Aunt Bessie's family, Norman, Lucille, Eugenia. Jean, anybody here from Aunt Bessie? Yes, that's fine. Yes, thank you. And Jean is still living.
Yeah, Jean is still living. She's in Winston-Salem.
She's a granddaughter of Ellis and Sue, right?
Yeah, Jean,
That's right.
Jean is my aunt.
That's right.
Yeah. And nice to know I have all this family.
Yes. Uncle Hobby's family, Fern, Helen, Olivia, Arlene. Olivia's here. Olivia. She is an actual granddaughter. Somebody talk about her.
Say something.
What you want to say, Olivia?
Tell them about going to Iowa.
Oh, I've been to Iowa lots of times. St. Louis, look at Charles, look at these. And have lots of people out there. I know. Glad that I can be here today.
Delighted to have you too. Thank you very much. And Uncle Hobby is one of our most noteworthy people because he actually served in the North Carolina General Assembly. So, Hobby Norman. Uncle Hubbard's family. We have Rebecca, Juanita, Archie, Richard, Faye, Paul, Rosemarie.
And these are all, those are here, they're all grandchildren.
And they're all grandchildren, as best I can tell.
Yeah, Rebecca Richards,
Y'all keep me. The rest of you can't be either. Y'all are young looking too.
Rebecca Richards, Faye, and Paul.
No, I'm great.
Great.
I'm great. Great.
So y'all are grandchildren. You're the
Oldest one.
And I remember a tale when Grandma was staying with us. And my mother and Daddy had to go work in the field, and I was a pretty good sized little girl. And they said, now don't you let Grandma go to the spring while we're gone. So I told Grandma she couldn't go, but guess what Grandma did? She went to the spring and she fell down.
Oh, no.
But I was a little girl and I couldn't tell her what to do. I couldn't help her, but I thought you'd like to hear that story.
Thank you so much. And then, of course, Aunt Maud was the last child, and we all, I suppose, most of us remember her. She didn't have any children, but she was a wonderful, wonderful person. So we all can talk about her because she was such a wonderful person.
She was a great aunt.
Great aunt.
This reunion could not have been possible without a lot of help. Those of you who came to the 1989 reunion that we had over in East Bend at the American Legion building, those of us that were there that day were given a document of all the people in the family up to that time. And it was page after page after page of information. And this was all prepared by Gail Williams Davis, who is Sam's mom, and and Carolyn's mom. Without this document, I'm not sure we would have had the means to get in touch with many of you for this reunion, particularly the people from Iowa, because that's where we got the names. But Gail is very, very instrumental in us being here today. Also, I'd like to thank Allie Norman for arranging for us to be here in this facility, which was the church that so many of our ancestors attended, as well as those of you who walked around in the cemetery can certainly attest to that. I'd also like to thank my brother Larry and Vicki Owens, because they are the two family genealogists, and they have both done extensive work on both sides of the family, and we thank you for all of that. Luann and I sort of jumped on the bandwagon, were able to ride out some of the stuff they had done. We'd also like to thank Van Gogh for photos that he gave us, and the YouTube videos. If you haven't seen those, you need to get up with one of those before you leave here. I'm going to be surprised if there's not another one in the making. But anyway, also, we need to thank Zach Dinkins, Luann's son, who has created this wonderful, wonderful family album for us. And if you have not received that by email, make sure we have your email address, because it is phenomenal. It is still a work in progress. We'll get one printed for you. He's going to be adding some pictures to that, and we thank him for the incredible amount of work on that. I also have to thank my husband, John Craver, because the week Luann and I spent together at my house trying to get all of this together, he was our computer guru that week and did a lot to help us. Okay, that brings us down to Luann Dinkins, who is the backbone person of this reunion. But Luann has traveled the roads of Yadkin County, in and out of cemeteries, in and out of documents at the courthouse, making phone calls, searching people out from Iowa on the internet. She's been everywhere. And if there's something you don't want her to know, you better do a good job of hiding that. Okay? Now, I think we're getting just about ready to eat, so let me give you a little heads up on how we're going to try to do that easy for everybody. First thing is, we did have a little expense for getting this reunion together. Luann, hold up the jar. We've got a donation jar for anybody who'd like to contribute to that. Yes, Patty.
While you're up there, I just wanted to say my niece has our genealogy all the way back to 1033.
Wow.
And if anybody wants to give her the email address, she'll send them a copy of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Make corrections.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
Dick, you're right.